Please. All right. Thank you, Todd. Take it away.
All right. So thank you. Thank you to Theorist. Thank you to the .NET Consortium for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to share with you guys tonight. As you mentioned, I am Dr. Todd Wolfe. My LinkedIn profile is there. Feel free to reach out, connect. Also my email address if you'd like to connect with me directly. Just some opening questions while I just give a little spiel about myself. Hopefully I can see the chat window at the same time. If you guys wanted to share a little bit about who you are, what industry you currently work in, what is your current role, and maybe the number of years, if any, that you have in the software development processing space. Myself, I've been doing this for a little over 20 years now. I currently lead software development teams, still dabble in code and development myself, as well as I'm a college professor for Purdue Global, which is right there in your own backyard, for many programming classes. So these topics that I'm going to share, the content I'm going to share tonight is passionate to me because it's where the industry is heading and things that we're going to be seeing and leveraging. And I'd like to hear from some of you throughout the night to see how you guys might be leveraging some of these tools so far.
Hey, Todd, I'll keep an eye out on the chat and just let you know so that you don't have to keep on checking it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so guys, if you just want to share a little bit about yourself, and maybe I can, customize a little bit of the presentation as well. But if you have questions, and then if you guys can keep a lookout for questions. And feel free to ask. I'm not an all-knowing expert on this topic, but I'll be happy to refer you in the direction of additional resources or answer what I can. What I'm hoping to accomplish tonight for this presentation is to share some recent research that I've done from various webinars and AI uses in the software development space. I want to have a collaborative discussion around the topic of AI with everybody. So at some point this evening or towards the end, we'll just do kind of a roundtable. And then I'll also demonstrate some of the integrations of AI in our current tool sets. And with any luck, we'll all leave with some additional knowledge that we didn't have beforehand. All right, so what do you guys think about this statement? If you have bad engineering practices before you use AI in your software development lifecycle, you'll have bad engineering practices after you integrate AI into your software development lifecycle. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Agreed.
Yeah, 100%, right? So AI is not a silver bullet to all of a sudden solve our organizational or our development challenges in our processes. It will not do that for us. So if we're going to ignore the flaws that we may currently have, throw AI into it, we'll still have those flaws afterwards. And we may even have some bigger concerns and issues because of AI. So keep that in mind. What intrigues me lately is how organizations, and this is really recent, as recent as earlier this week, some Gartner research that's been shared. You see that a large number of organizations that Gartner has been surveying are in that piloting phase, and as we entered the fourth quarter for this year. So earlier on in the year, we had a smaller percentage, and now what we're seeing is that companies are becoming more comfortable, and now they're into that piloting, experimenting mode of how AI can actually be helping them. And they're leaning, and the trend is showing us significant change from where we were very cautious about a year ago. And about a year ago today, I can remember ChatGPT was kind of hitting the mainstream news, and some of you probably remember that too. We didn't really know what it was yet. Many of us maybe never heard of it yet, but it was really starting to get a lot of attention around this time last year. And earlier on in the year, we were kind of looking at it from the corporate world of, we're not sure. It's risky. We're afraid of it. We've all heard some horror stories of code bases, company secrets getting indexed and trained in the training sets that are out there. So we're very kind of cautiously seeing what we could do with it. Now, as the year has gone on, 10 months later or so, we're looking at 78% feel the benefits outweigh its risk. What are you guys thinking currently? Are you feeling the benefits are outweighing the risks, or are you still very cautious?
For us and for me, we see a lot of benefit to it as long as we understand what we're doing. I think, some people have jumped right into AI thinking, oh, AI solves my problems, but they don't have an idea of what that problem is. And so by simply learning just a modicum about it, you can understand, I have found, to how you can work it into your system and where it fills holes. So it's certainly, the benefits outweigh its risks if you're applying it towards the places where it's most effective.
I would agree. Anybody else have a view? I see a couple posts in the chat about agreeing.
So Cindy sent you her information about connecting on LinkedIn. Matt agrees the benefits outweigh the risks. I'd be curious what other people think when you say the benefits outweigh the risks. Why? Like Danny said, what are the risks?
I'll have a slide towards the end about some of the risks to be concerned about, but one of the biggest risks, just having your data being shared as training sets that could actually be revealed in other engines that might be out there, or other people using the systems. So that's one of the biggest risks out there, but there's certainly other ones I'll share coming up.
Eric says misconfigured systems could be an issue.
Relying on it as truth, right? And it may not be accurate. You have to remember the public ones and the source of information at the time that it was actually learned on. So you'll see a lot of information that might not be current to today's current platforms or operating systems, right?
Oh, yeah. Eric also mentioned leading to access from attackers. Cindy says within the legal, they will want it behind their firewall or private.
That's one of the biggest things that we see nowadays, is having it behind your corporate firewalls and running your own devices in your own data centers to keep it so that the information does not get out and get used accidentally into training sets. Certainly the case. So good. We'll talk about some more of the risks coming up. So one of the reasons why I chose this topic, and one of the reasons why I focused it on the SDLC, on this chart shared again by Gartner here recently, from some recent surveying they've done, look what group within your organization is one of the highest adoption rates right now. Software development teams. IT in general overall, but software development, and seeing that 21% of what they survey, they're seeing that use. I know, working in the space, that I've used it for making my day a little bit more efficient, and we'll talk about some of those ways coming up as well and demonstrate some of those. And I know many individuals are just using it even as a quick knowledge-based fact-finding approach, just to answer questions and be better at giving responses than just like random Google searches of what we used to use in the past. So anybody surprised by the percentages here or where it stands out?
I'm not, but we've actually been trying to implement it. So customer service, pretty big. Software development team, trying to make sure that doesn't become our replacement for Stack Overflow or thinking for yourself. Really, the big issue is, does it become you're not thinking for yourself, like you were saying earlier.
Yep.
Are you going to share these slides?
Absolutely. I will. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely.
So if you send those to me, I'll upload them somewhere, or just give me a link where you have them posted, and I'll add that to our Meetup page so people can review this later. Thank you very much. Yep,
absolutely. All right, so software development teams, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. Right. So what I find astonishing, by 2027, 70% of professional developers will use AI-powered coding tools, up from less than 10% today. So Gartner's expecting this to be the next big, change for us in the industry across the way we do our work today. So what also led me to why I wanted to cover this topic is one of the biggest challenges that I see as a professor teaching new software developers. And I've heard a few of you who are looking for jobs that have maybe dabbled in Python, learning Angular. The cognitive load, this concept of cognitive load theory, is really what is hindrance to us in the ability to actually work in this industry. It's a steep learning curve, right? And there's so much noise and so much that we have to work through around trying to grasp the concept. So I look at this as ways, if I'm going to help to produce the next generation of software development developers as well as future leaders, and what I do in my organization, I help to develop future leaders of the company and the software development space. It's all around this cognitive load and how AI can help us reduce that and actually understand the technology sets we need to work with to drive efficiencies and to do our work smarter and better, all at the same time as co-partnering with the technology. So if you're not familiar with the cognitive load theory, that's a pretty cool, interesting topic around helping put things at people's fingertips to work and learn things faster than if they were doing it through some of the traditional models that are out there. So there's concepts around intrinsic, extraneous, and germane load. If you guys, the definitions are all there for you. So again, it's a very interesting concept, but it really helps us understand the learning process theory. And the goal, again, is to successfully complete an activity. Like as a developer over the years, there's been time and time again where I've been like overly frustrated, you run into a wall, and there's just so much content and so much material out there, you don't know what to do or you don't know how to put the pieces together. That's where, in working in conjunction, one of the things I've been trying to do in the teaching space is to show students how they can leverage the capabilities of the chat integrations or the chat GPT integrations and the AI integrations to learn the programming languages and learn what they're doing at a much faster pace. And I've been seeing some real value there. For me, if I look back over the years, so I started doing this in the late 90s. In my mind, in many ways, the tools were simpler. Not saying programming was easy. It took a lot of hours and time to actually pick it up. There was less tools to work with from what I have to touch today or different technology sets that I work with today. The tools weren't really integrated at the time. We didn't have a lot of readily available resources. And some of you may remember going to online forums and posting a message of what you're trying to do, hoping another senior developer would get back to you. There were some things like ICQ channels and AIM and Yahoo Messenger. We used to open these things called textbooks to learn how to program from. Anybody remember those kind of horror stories? So in recent
Sorry,
years,
I missed the last 20 seconds.
no worries. In recent years, we've probably advanced that from to using Google searches in place of the textbook lookups, Stack Overflow. I think I heard somebody mention Stack Overflow earlier today. What would your life be like in the last 5 years if you didn't have Stack Overflow as a developer, right? Or working and trying to find how things to do. Problem though, we're getting overloaded by Git repos that are out there, lots of source code available. It's hard to believe there's over 350,000 NuGet packages that could be valuable to us in some way, shape, or form. The numerous amount of frameworks to choose from, depending upon the space that we're working in, right? It's makes it very hard for us to keep all of that material, like know which one to use, when to use it. We'll use Discord and Slack channels. I heard of a new type of communication channel here earlier tonight, not Discord or Slack. A few years ago, everything was Slack channels. Now it's Discord. YouTube videos, we get a lot of our material from YouTube and going out there and hoping to do a search and getting someone else to demonstrate what we're doing. IntelliSense saves us a ton of time. It's not perfect. It's actually gotten pretty far along the advance for single line code, but it's still not ways to make our lives super easy yet. The integration of tool sets and dev suites that focus more towards DevOps capabilities have come a long ways. The limitations, of course, that we still deal with, though, none of this content or these technologies that we can go out there and leverage help us reduce the cognitive load. Most of it contains static local knowledge. Nothing's dynamic. It's not machine learned. It's not within the context of the things that we're typically doing. So you don't get like multi-line results of code chunks out of it or anything, or tips or any pointers. So the limitations are still very much the case, and it doesn't help us become more efficient in the work that we're doing. So we're constantly switching windows, we're constantly doing searches, we're constantly trying to refer to other material just to efficiently do our jobs. But there's a lot of distractions that come away to do that. So with all of these limitations, this unsustainable load is on our technical resources. So we have enormous amount of enterprise code that we have to go through and understand, becomes barriers to comprehension. If you ever think about when you walk into a new company or to a new contract and you have to start getting into their code base, typically you don't have enough resources who already know it that can share the knowledge with you. There won't be enough documentation, or there isn't enough documentation in the code itself to understand it. All of those open source code dependencies, they're all for different problem solving needs. They're time consuming to understand them and to know which one is for which purpose and which one's the best to use at a certain time. I remember many years ago when jQuery came out, those of us who wrote JavaScript were always pulling jQuery into our web projects, and jQuery became like the quickest or most popular JavaScript library on any website across the world. And it was probably a good portion of the time, maybe 50% or more, you didn't even need jQuery. Plain old JavaScript is all you actually needed. So we'd see these dependencies and we just grab them. Go ahead.
I was just laughing.
Yeah. So there's this whole site out there. It's like, you may not need jQuery, I think it's called, just because devs just chewed up that framework and used it for everything, the simplest things. That constant switching between coding and searching, along with other disruptions, our attention span is shattered. Like, I really need to, take the watch off, turn the phone off, and shut down completely to focus in if I'm going to work on a coding project these days. If you're in an office environment, I mean, think about it from a perspective of all of the meetings, jumping around from meeting to meeting, having to be pinged on Teams. You still got your emails, you got your own personal devices, and whatever's happening outside around your office environment, either at home or in the office, the attention span isn't there. So anything that can help us better focus and to achieve the desired outcomes is going to improve that overall experience, help to breed the new set of tech talent that's going to work in the industry, as well as produce efficiencies. So the future of that's going to revolve around generative AI. And there's two main vectors to that as it is right now. We have the plugins that are out there, and we have conversational. So with the plugins, they're going to be directly available to us in our technology tool set. And we'll basically interact with them as if they were part of that tool set. Nowadays, most of the time we're actually enabling them, we're actually adding in some extra extensions or enabling them. But in the newer software products, and we're going to see this more and more on Microsoft products today, they just released their Copilot for Microsoft Office integration. It's going to be there. It's just going to be available to us, and we'll just be used to it, and we'll be able to leverage it in all of the different applications that we do. And like I said, we're seeing that with many of the vendors out there in the development space. We're kind of seeing it still in that plugin capacity where we have to add a little bit of a capability to it. But so when your organization adopts, when Microsoft makes it actually feasibly, as far as cost-wise to adopt it, you're going to have that in all of your Office products and your experience when it comes to the new Copilot release that's out there today. So that's context aware. It knows what's going on around it. Ability to filter, produce really relative fragments or entire code blocks to quickly apply and then to do your work so much faster than you could in the past. That conversational element where you don't have it actually in your tool, the integration isn't there. It doesn't know the context in which you're giving it. There's no filters. It will give you whole programs. And what I find a lot of times is the output is just way too lengthy. And therefore, you kind of got to filter through it yourself and figure out how to work with it. You can take conversational AI and you can put a lot of guardrails around it and shaping it, but you really have to be kind of skilled at that to do it best. So I like the way the plugins work. I'm going to demonstrate both plugins and conversational aspects tonight. In the event you guys haven't worked with them yet, I have no intent of showing anything corporate secret wise or anything too deep, just kind of showing what's available and what's out there, and you guys can take it to the next level from there. Some of the early feedback that we're seeing from development communities and those organizations that have been adopting this in the past year. A large healthcare company is claiming that they're seeing 20% more code per developer. And the NPS scores, so basically the net promoter scores from the developers on AI coding assistance, is an 85% positive rating on working with them. One engineer has been known to say Copilot writes about 80% of their code with about 80% of accuracy, and I don't even really code, I prompt and edit. I honestly think for developers, that's going to be the future across the SDLC. In the other areas of the SDLC, it's likely not going to do 80% of our work, but in the developer space, with the proper guidance and training, I highly likely see that as a possibility. It's going to take a bit more to get there for many of us, but the possibilities are there, and the way that it completes code for you is pretty impressive. Some of the benefits of AI across the SDLC: efficiency, of course, is quickly process the massive amounts of codes that we have. Allows us to improve our code security and quality, but I'll say that's with a caveat and some disclaimers. Allows us to innovate and increase our innovation in our code. Allows for that boosted process and speed. And of course, that lowered cognitive load that's on us by giving us those tips or those improvements along the way while we're doing our work. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the risks earlier on. I have a few more on here that we didn't mention. Data leaks are a possibility if we're letting our information get out and getting trained so that others can see results from it. Early on, horror stories. I heard a person today talk about their use of Copilot in its beta mode, and they had it in their organization. And granted that Copilot for Office 365 will be within your own environment, and it's not getting trained for everybody else that's part of it. But what one of the users found was it found documents across their corporate network that weren't properly secured. So many of us have our corporate networks that, I might have some documents stored in places that I wouldn't expect you to find, but the security around those are not possible. Well, Copilot's going to find them. It's going to bring them back in searches. So if you were to search for something like salaries on your corporate network, and granted it might be in the HR directories, and granted HR might think it's secured, but chances are it may not be. So data leaks internally and externally are a big risk. That loss of skills in the workforce is another big concern, because if we're going to leverage these tools so much, right? I think of myself, when I move to a new area or I travel, I don't remember road names. Why don't I remember road names anymore? Because I have the maps on my iPhone, and either Google Maps or Siri will tell me where I'm going, and I have to no longer worry about driving. So when it comes to leveraging the AI technology in our SDLC process, are we going to be less experienced in the actual underlying skills? I remember when we first came out with some of the tools like Dreamweaver in the web space, and it was almost like the early adoption of low code, no code. Those things created record sets and connections to databases. And as a developer who knew how to do that stuff by hand, it was very challenging for me to let a tool do it for me. But if you never have done it yourself and you've never looked under the covers, will the new workforce actually understand the actual building blocks that the technology requires to create? The convincing but inaccurate results being given. I have seen, results come back. We'll actually see an example of one of the sites I'll share that actually lets you take different AI engines and get results from them and see how they compete against one another. It gives very convincing results in many cases, and you can't take that for 100% accuracy. You have to really understand. Like I've dumped data from open data sources into AI and asked it to analyze things and give it questions, and it comes back with what looks to be a correct answer, but when you actually validate it, it's not. So bad code leads to bad suggestions. If you have bad code, we talked about this in that opening little statement I made. If your code's bad in the first place, well, the suggestions it gives you, it could be equally as bad in most cases. Less experienced workers producing code, but not skilled in best practice and experience. What I worry the most about that, and this is where a lot of junior developers or developers coming out of college always worry me, it's like they don't understand the secure coding processes or the secure development lifecycle. So they come out, they learn a programming language, they're ready to go, but no one had ever taught them about securing their code and what's important around that aspect. So the less experienced workers who don't have the exposure around it are going to be more likely or inclined to make mistakes or not know of the components that need to be there. And then that last one is licensing infringement is also a concern, because if code gets into that learning algorithm for that engine that you're using for AI that is some other organization's, it's possible that you could end up inheriting it and find out that you're infringing, or your code ends up becoming something that's now considered open source, and you didn't want that to happen. So those are all concerns to consider. Has anybody else thought of any others since we mentioned this early on? There's probably more, but these are some of the biggest ones.
Yeah, just to run off of your less experienced workers producing code. Just like the developers that use Stack Overflow and don't understand what they're doing. The fact that they could use code and bring it into our code base and not know what it does is a scary thing. So, I know there have been conversations of, no, we won't let teams use something like a GitHub Copilot because they'll use that to write code. I think there's good parts to it though. I mean, it's great and makes us more efficient, but for new developers, same lesson as Stack Overflow. Understand what the code is that's in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I would 100% agree. You should not be using any code unless you know line by line what that code actually does, right?
Yeah, I think that the issue is developers just accepting the code. Like you said, it could give you, convincing but inaccurate results. You'll get code that works that might not be the best solution. And you'll just accept it because it works rather than, and it may be doing bad things, but because you didn't take the time to understand what was written, you've added 17 NuGet packages to support 8 lines of code just to get it to work.
Right. Absolutely. And I see Gabe made a good comment about using code analysis tools like SonarQube. Yeah, those are tools out there if your organization has them and available to you to do that code analysis. But think about when something's ready to ship, when you start doing that towards the later end of the phase of the delivery cycle, and now you have to refactor a lot of code that the person who didn't know what they were doing was writing and using. Could be impactful on a delivery timeline. But SonarQube could actually help. I do like that idea. So across the entire SDLC, we're seeing the abilities of where AI can assist us. Like I said, I wouldn't say AI is at a point where we can just let it go. Yeah, it could create some simple programs. It can do homework assignments, I think, in a lot of cases for students. But it's needs to be evolved further, and we need to work and co-work with it. And I think the name of Copilot is like one of the best ideas or names for using the tool hand in hand as peer programmers could. In the requirements, writing and analysis and user story generation, I'm going to show you a couple plugin features to Azure DevOps. I'm big on using Azure boards and Azure DevOps for my spaces. Also Jira has the ability, or Atlassian has the ability. So we'll look at that from the analysis stage here. Design, I haven't seen a lot of great tools yet with the design aspects. I'll demonstrate or show one that's got a little bit of it built in here. Code and testing, definitely cover that with some IDEs here in a bit. Deployment, same type of scenarios, since you can have it write code for you in the development testing phases, your CI/CD, your different pipeline scripting and such. It's very good at helping you there. And then from a maintenance perspective, there are tool sets out there, which I won't actually be showing any of those tonight, that can go ahead and do some performance analysis automation and give recommendations. But the other bullet on there about document generation, if you are coming new into an organization and you have the tool available to you that you can use and you can have it explore your code, it can help tell you how the code is structured and help tell you how the code is put together or what it's actually doing. So that document generation piece can actually come in handy. Again, if you have that ability to use it. From a, we're going to work in the industry. Where do we have to turn our attention to for future skills? And what do we need the workforce that are going to come into this field for the next generation to be really skilled in what's good at? From my perspective, we're going to need to take our practice courses and really focus in on that prompt engineering element. Even though we might dabble, I call myself a dabbler at this stage in the game with the tools. It's almost like refinement of Google searches, right? Many of us know how to type into a Google search bar and get results. But there's advanced searching capabilities. You can type in things like in URL and site, refine your searches, and get really specific feedback from a Google search. Prompt engineering is going to be the same way, and every one of our language models are going to have different ways to interact with them that are optimal. So we're going to need to focus in on having ourselves really skilled at that prompt engineering ability, but we still can't forget about the entire software development lifecycle and the process around it, around gathering good requirements, both functional and non-functional, because a tool can't produce us valid code if we give it requirements that are not going to be realistic of what we're trying to accomplish, right? So we need to know the process and be good at the processes behind the scenes, even if we haven't done all of them. Secure coding, we need to know what elements make our code secure, what elements make our code insecure. We got to know the process of it, ensuring that our code has been checked for security vulnerabilities. We got to understand non-performant code. And, just because it produced it for us doesn't mean it's the most efficient way to actually get it done. If we don't allow it to know about libraries in our environments that we're already using and including, or we already have them available to us to leverage, you're going to end up with large sets of repetitive code. So as the future skill set of anyone working across the SDLC, they still are going to need to know what the best practices in engineering are in order to optimize and leverage these tools that are going to be available to us the best for our organizations. It's not going, like I said, there's no silver bullet here, but with the experience and knowing the right way to do things, you're working hand in hand to actually do this better. Some of the current tools in the marketplace are out there. Again, expand the entire SDLC for test case creation, requirements management. I kind of like the new thing that IBM is focusing in on, which they're calling AI ops. What I suspect from my searching and studying, I don't really see nothing on it yet, but as we started out with DevOps and we've moved to secure DevOps, I'm expecting the next stage to be an AI secure DevOps or some blend of that to be out there. But IBM, with their requirements management capabilities, they're looking at calling it or co-branding it with AI Ops. In Azure boards, we're going to take a look at this free marketplace plugin called Tachyon GPT. Helps you actually enhance the details in your epics and user stories right within the creation of them. In Atlassian for Jira, they have an AI assistant that you can turn on. There's a free trial to use, and then obviously it costs you month per month afterwards. Copilot, we've mentioned that several times this evening. That's the big one. That's the one that Microsoft is pushing inside of their Office 365. It's been available in our IDEs. There's a free trial if you haven't tried it. Once you get beyond your free trial, then it's going to be $10 a month. For an individual license, it's going to cost you a little bit more inside your organizations. I like the way it behaves in VS Code. I'm not really liking Visual Studio quite yet, but I probably haven't used it as much in Visual Studio. It's also available in IntelliJ, and I think a few other open source contributors have tried to get it to work in other editors by now, but those are the three that I've seen it functioning and working in, and I have it plugged into my VS Code and my Visual Studio spaces. And then outside of that, if you're looking for the non-integrated approaches, you have ChatGPT, of course. You have Bard, U.com, you may not have heard of. That one's available out there. There's a handful of others, but what I thought was the coolest, so Chatbot Arena, I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but UC Berkeley put this together where you basically submit something to one of the large language models, and it'll put them head to head, and then it has you score which one you like the results from better, and you don't know which ones are giving you the responses back. So it's pretty cool to see the Chatbot Arena. So I put links on the slides for that in case you haven't had a chance to check that one out as well. All right, so I got a little bit of time. I'm going to just go over some of the tools so you guys can see it integrated inside of the tools, and then we can finish up with a little roundtable discussion. And again, I don't have nothing too deep, just so that anybody who hasn't played with these before can get an idea of how they work.
Hey, Todd,
Sure.
Matthew Newbill was asking if anyone has used Microsoft's Copilot versus Git Copilot, and if there were any thoughts or opinions.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the answer too. I've only used Git Copilot so far.
I think Microsoft Copilot is different. That Copilot is more chat-based and generative AI for like office environment and like general use, like Copilot built into Windows. And Git Copilot I thought was geared towards code. I mean, technically they're both owned by Microsoft, so I guess they can use the Copilot name no matter what.
That's
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, that's how I kind of understood it as well. But I haven't had the opportunity to use it inside of Microsoft's Office 365 yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm showing the one that, like I said, was the most trendy in the news, probably that started us on the big wave earlier on, end of last year, early into this year. This is OpenAI, this is ChatGPT. What I'm giving an example here is, so one of the things that I do is I'll have an idea about creating a piece of software or technology or something. So one morning I woke up, I had an idea for creating a Visual Studio Code extension. Feel free to borrow my idea, bring it to market, whatever, I don't mind. But I had an idea for a VS Code extension. I went out to the marketplace, I looked to see if something like that existed, and there was nothing out there. So I came here that morning and I said, hey, give me some functional and non-functional requirements for what this extension would do or could do. And I didn't give it too much guidance. And it broke down a bunch of functional requirements, and it broke down what my favorite category of non-functional, because I can't pull these out of people. So having some guidance around non-functional requirements for anything that I've ever developed over time is just great. So for me, no, this is not perfect user requirements by any means, but it gives me a lot of ideas and a lot of ideation generation to innovate what my concept to bring to market was. So I thought that was pretty cool, because I gave it in here. This was early on, probably within the first few weeks of playing with the tool, and it just gave me back so many ideas that I probably would have thought of. It certainly wouldn't have been in my MVP that I put together real quick. So that was pretty cool. So that's the ChatGPT one. Bard is Google's. I had to do something similar. And this is, like I said, putting these head to head and seeing the results that you like, and ask it questions and such. But same type of things. It gave me back requirements that were functional, non-functional. ChatGPT certainly gave me a lot more than Bard did. I thought it was interesting how Bard actually gave me additional requirements, and it put some things within context that I would never, like I said, again, considered. So even though it's not by any means a full set or a full feature set as a developer I could use, it really helps me go back and think or look at a BRD that I might have and say, oh, what about this? We might have forgot that. There's always a bunch of standards or NFRs that we overlook. So I feel, again, this is a good way to kind of get that extra guidance. I had u.com do it. Again, I haven't seen u.com too much. This one to me was a little bit new. I came across it recently. I had to do the same thing. Formatting is not quite as nice, but it's got some other ideas and ways to do it. That, again, I found actually in here, this was more geared to the concept than the other two. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. That gave me some more gamification type features than the others.
Todd,
Yep.
Gabe says you can ask GPT for a list of questions to get your brain working on a problem.
That's a good prompt. Yeah, that's not a good prompt to consider. So that's one I'll check out. I don't think I've actually tried that one before. Thanks, Gabe. This is the chat arena that was put out by Berkeley. So essentially, as you go down here, you put in what you're looking for, and it basically puts two models against each other, and you review them side by side. And what they want you to do, and the reason why they put this together is, and it's available for us to play with and try, is they want us to rate which one is giving better results. So this is using various different models out there. This one's using Llama 2, which is actually on the left side, is actually, for those of you who might know, that's Meta's or Facebook's. I don't know who Vaisuna's is off the top of my head, but again, it lets you see those results and you can kind of decide on which one you feel is better. There's a lot of analysis out here. You can see the leaderboard, but GPT-4 has been the one that's been highest rated currently. So again, pretty cool, interesting thing. If anyone knows about Kaggle, Kaggle's currently kind of promoting this and getting people to go out there and try it out more to give this more attention. In the Azure boards, I'll move to my Azure board demo space next, just so you can see what's available there. So this is that plugin that was on my slide. And we have an option. You can hook this up to your OpenAI ChatGPT model, or you can hook this up to the Azure model. I don't have the Azure subscription, so I have the ChatGPT subscription, but so I have it configured to that. But if I go in to, let's say, a work item in this case, instead of a user story, what you'll see is that I have this free plugin added here. So right here within context of my work, I have a work item assistant. And what that can do is it can improve my task. I can tell it to surprise me. I can give it specific refinements, and it gives me some prompt tips. Like I can say, make make it more descriptive and concise, include all necessary details. So all you do is you tell it here, again, it's conversational, but it's an embedded. So make title or descriptive. And it's going to read what I currently have in that space, and it's going to give a recommendation right within the context. So if you have a product manager who writes very bad or poor user stories, or creates work item tasks, or your development manager never gives you enough details in your work item tasks, they can leverage this to help do it better, give it some more meaning to it, and maybe give it more value than what you might be getting nowadays. Again, within, you have to be mindful of prompting it and giving it some good information to work with. So I thought that one was pretty cool. Again, that one's free in the Azure Workplace and the Marketplace, with the caveat that you have an engine to plug into. Over here in the Jira space, if you haven't checked out Jira, I know many of the companies like to use the Jira spaces for their bugs or user story, and they're similar to what I do in Azure DevOps. They have an AI assistant right there. So as you see down here, can you help me find missing requirements? It gives me like a quick little, you can actually ask it. I don't have much here in this task, so probably won't find much. This one's a free trial, and then they charge you monthly. And I don't recall what engine they're using off the top of my head, but you didn't actually provide the opportunity to choose one. It just automatically took whatever Atlassian is providing. Yeah, so within the context, it's going to give you some ideas that are going to be helpful. And it's kind of interesting because I think what I called this was I wanted to get the task for the login capability for a new collection system. So you see down here, it's saying password recovery or account lockout mechanisms that need to be considered, right? So it's really saying, reading off of what I put in there, and again, prompting me and giving me more ideas to ensure maybe I didn't overlook something. I know in 20 plus years of experience, I still overlook things, right? I always say, well, we should have a checklist or we should have something to go against to make sure we don't miss that next time. Oh, and sure we do. We do lessons learned all the time. We still forget things, right? Everyone that does software development knows there's always something silly when we go to deliver a product or ship it. We missed it, and it's like, how did we miss this? We've done this 100 times. And with the use of these assistants, maybe early on, you can catch them before you get to that end product result set. The drawing space, this tool, I was kind of surprised to actually have it in there. So I don't use Visio a lot, or I don't show students in the educational space Visio so much anymore because Microsoft's always had a large license cost. It's not free. So in the organizational space, I'll use Visio, but Microsoft doesn't seem to be putting Copilot in there yet. But this company or this site, it's if you just go draw.io, it's a lightweight Visio. It's free. It's in your web browser. What I saw they've added recently, and again, everybody's embedding AI or AI elements into their tool set these days. So under new, they have this smart template, and we'll just take its prompt. We can ask it other questions, but if we do a process for hiring new employees, it actually will create you somewhat of a process flow diagram. I've had it try to do a diagram for a database a little bit earlier, but it wouldn't give me my attributes and relationships that I wanted. So it's not evolved yet, but I'm sure it's going to get better. But we can create design documents, or at least get a head start jump on a design document or a process flow or a data flow diagram without having to start from scratch, which is a nice little jump in the process. Again, you need to know what it's producing, you need to know if it makes sense and is within context of what you're hoping for. So that's in the space of some of the non-IDEs. Over in the IDE world, what I have here is VS Code, Visual Studio, as well as Azure Data Studio. And what we'll do first is we'll take my VS Code. So here in VS Code, I have Copilot. And the interesting thing, because obviously in VS Code, you have tons of extensions to choose from. Copilot's the one that I'm going to demonstrate. It's not the only one. There's multiple ones that are out there that play or plug into ChatGPT. There's another one called Cody. I was checking out yesterday. But so far, I'm liking the way Copilot works in here. And hopefully I can get this work off of this prompt, or let's just do, actually, I gave it a comment already. So what I'll do is, I think it's Control-I, yeah, Control-I, and then I'll paste in what I want it to do. And you'll see it put together some Python code for me pretty quickly. Again, I need to know if it's going to actually be accurate and do what I hope that I wanted it to do. But it brings in the pandas library because I want it to read a data file, and to read a data file in Python, pandas one of the best libraries to do it. It doesn't import, or it doesn't comment why it brought in that library, which I wish it would. It does tell me that it's reading the CSV file that I gave it. It did do what I asked it to. I said, tell me the column headers, and I said, give me a sample of the results. So again, I'm showing students in the IDEs how they can get it to help them produce code and then modify it, make some changes, and still understand what it's doing. Not recommending, obviously, they produce their entire assignments to do it with, but same goes if I'm using this in the commercial space or organizational space, it's helping me get lines of code a little bit faster. What I can also do in Copilot, I'll launch it through right-click this time, but I have the ability to explain the code, fix the code if it wanted to, generate docs and tests, but start code chat is pretty cool. This is the piece that I like to show students. You know, like what does this code do? And let's see if it gives me something in chat. So I can view it in chat, and it will basically explain what that code is doing. This is actually a very bad example. It didn't explain all the lines. It just looked at that, a little context of it. But you have a little AI chatbot here. And what I liked about it, and I was showing a Java class recently, is that if you're working with Java code and you don't know what the library does, and you can quickly just have the GitHub Copilot chat explain to you what the library is doing and why you would use that library or recommend other libraries. And just to show that this code actually ran, we'll actually run it, and you can see that the results work. So it does give you working running code. Again, you need to know if it's doing what you had wanted it to do, but it's all right here in my development experience. Over in Visual Studio, similar extensions available. I wasn't as huge of a fan. I did this earlier today, but you see that I have a little bar over here called GitHub Copilot. It brings up solutions. When I was working with C# and asking it to do things earlier today, it was giving me like 10 different results and options. So I wasn't a huge fan. And then the other thing that was a little bit rough here was I had to actually ask it for what I wanted for in the right location of this little console app. So if I said, generate a function to add two numbers up here in the main, it only gave me this. It didn't actually give me the function. I took that same question and I put it down here outside of the main where you would have your function definition, and it went ahead and it created it properly. So those are kind of weird behaviors. I don't know if those are just quirks yet, or maybe it's just my experience working with it inside of Visual Studio, but it was kind of a weird capability. It's very chatty though, I saw. So if you go to GitHub Copilot down in your output, you'll see a lot of information flowing back and forth as you're typing, while it's basically watching the work you're doing to make recommendations. So that's how it works inside of Visual Studio. And then the last one I was just going to show real quick. It's also available in Azure Data Studio. So it's not available in SQL Server Management Studio yet, but it's available in Data Studio. So within Data Studio, I think it's pretty impressive in writing SQL. So for those of you that might be learning SQL or you haven't worked with SQL in a long time, it's pretty good. Again, you have to give it some guardrails and guidance, but it's pretty good at helping you build queries. So like in this case, I said, use the AdventureWorks database, the one that's currently in my session, to show me which product has the most orders. You'll see the results down there. But when I did that, again, it started to write a query for me. And I have to understand SQL to really know if this is going to produce what I had wanted. I have to also know a little bit about my database and the database design and structures, but you'll see that it's going to fail me because it's a live presentation. There we go. It produces the joins and all, and comes back with the results that I'm hoping for just by hitting tabs and enter keys, and you have some SQL. It's pretty powerful. Folks that are working inside of Power BI, Tableau, you're seeing these types of capabilities available for report generation. You got to look at the results. You just can't take it for accurate and hope that it's just going to be correct. It can definitely give you false positives, give you the wrong queries. It certainly can do that for you, but it's much faster. Like I could not type as quickly as that produced it. So it's like, to me, it's like a super enhanced version of IntelliSense, which was always populating one line at a time, but now it's able to produce multiple lines, and I just have to validate what it gave me to ensure the accuracy around it. So those are various tools I wanted to show. In case you guys haven't seen them before, hopefully they open your eyes to what the capabilities are out there. With that being said, that's everything I wanted to share, and I just want to open up for discussion.
I asked it in the chat, but I guess I'll go verbal on it. Do you know if the Jira AI assistant keeps your data private within like the organization?
I don't know 100%. It does state what it does on the site where you actually add it. And it gives you the specifications, and I can't recall if it said it keeps everything private or not. I do believe it said it doesn't use it for training.
Yeah. Oh, Matthew, sorry, I was on mute when I was asking him the question. Then you're like, oh, I'll just go on microphone, and I'm like, oh, that whole time I was asking him the question, I was muted. Brilliant.
No worries.
But that's a big deal. Like we had that issue in submitting our information. We don't want anything to become part of a publicly available model. You know, there's just intellectual property. So there's a lot of education that occurs at the org where we say, hey, you're not allowed to submit your information to AI engines. You know, you can do whatever you want with your own personal stuff, but corporate data should not be used unless it's, you know, publicly available.
And I think you're hitting on an important piece around your organizations need policies around this, right? Because your devs are going to use it or your technologists are going to use it.
Yeah.
To, if either you allow them inside your firewalls or not, they're going to use it on some device that they have to increase efficiency. So you got to be really clear about what they shouldn't do, especially if you're enabling it inside the firewalls.
Gabe had a question. What's the biggest feature or unit of work you've been able to get a large language model to produce? For example, showing a JSON API response and save it to the database using Entity Framework. Yeah.
So Gabe, I haven't tried to do something that complex. I have some of that work that I actually have in Visual Studio. I'd like to see it do, but I have not tried it yet.
I actually have seen a very complete code solution get provided. What's funny is it often will exclude any of the NuGet packages that it assumed. So I'm guessing it just stole code from a whole bunch of places and didn't give proper attribution. But you know, once I found some of the NuGet packages, it worked. So that was pretty interesting. Danny asked, can Copilot or other plugins do code review?
Yeah, they can do code review. They can review your current code and they can tell you areas to optimize or improve it, as well as just even enhancing the documentation you might have left out.
Mm-hmm. Gabe mentioned he wouldn't work anywhere that doesn't allow LLM usage. I think that's unfair. I don't think companies are saying no LLM usage. They're saying no using their proprietary information in a public LLM model. I mean, you don't have the right to take company data that isn't public and put it into the cloud and say, hey, summarize this for me and damn the consequences. That's not okay. And I think that's the reason it's a policy. So I don't think anyone's trying to get in anyone's way. I know I want my team to use generative AI. I think using it in a support context, super useful. Summarizing data, super useful. But as long as, again, like what I said in the very beginning was, if you understand how it works. So if you understand that you can upload it to a private company only model, like Gabe, you mentioned, yeah, great. But you can't just not understand how AI works and willy-nilly upload any sort of company proprietary information to a service. And that it's not just a AI thing. I mean, it's any service where you're sharing company data. You know, it could be, you know, proprietary algorithms that you're asking for a code review on. Well, if you don't know that free site that you're using that advertises code reviews, you're uploading your code and saying, hey, is this a good algorithm? Is it effective? Well, what if that's a patented algorithm that you have?
Right, I like Gabe's comment about using the same discretion as Stack Overflow. How many posts have we seen
Yeah.
where someone had to redact usernames and passwords or API keys, right? Because some developer will just paste their entire code snippet out there.
Oh yeah. So
the same rules apply. I mean, you have to have common sense. You have to understand what the language model is doing, how it's using the information you're giving it, and yeah, I mean, you just can't put it out there.
right.
Danny, your question to me would make me wonder. I'd be curious to see if the models versus what we're seeing coming out in the search engines would get better results. So you could certainly ask it, which library or package would be the best to use depending upon the language you're working with. But I'd be curious what results come back based upon the different models, because I feel like you're going to get, based upon current libraries versus some that have been out there longer,
Yeah. I recently had, if we're in the round table, an old friend from school reach out to me, from like middle school, reach out to me and say, hey, can you help me with designing an application? And, typical to what we're asked as software engineers, wouldn't this be easy for you to do because you're a developer? And like, well, the key is going to be like what you're asking is really complex. Why don't you spend some time building some requirements for me? Like high level, just mock up what it is you think this looks like screen by screen. So at least visually we can get a feeling for what you're talking about. And I got a response like a few weeks later. That was like this 1.5 page document. And I'm like, this is so high level. And the first thing I thought is, did he ask, like Chat GPT to build a solution, like give me the requirements document, a high level requirements document for a software application that does this. But I didn't mention that. I'm like, so who wrote this for you? I mean, it's very high level, like this is what a consultant would just consider pure gold, because they would just jack up the price on everything because you have no idea what you want to do. If they would even accept the project. And he comes back and goes, well, I didn't really know what to write. So I asked, I think he said generative AI, or I used an AI assistant to write it for me. I'm like,
Right, exactly. Like I said, that the examples that I gave, if you compare the 3 different ones I asked, they're all going to be a little bit different, but they are high level, right? They gave some good ideas. They're within the context of again, I gave a little bit more guardrails in terms of my questioning, and you could always do follow-up prompt questioning, but unless you go into what they gave you, again, you're not going to get the specificity. So yeah, you got to be aware of what the results are and if they actually are valuable to what you're trying to accomplish. And the more follow-up prompts you do, or the refinements you do, and the more clear it's like a Google search. And that's why prompt engineering is going to be such a critical skill set. I think you're going to see in the educational space to continue to get promoted. We'll probably see like prompt engineering certifications next year. If we don't, I'll be surprised.
Gabe mentioned how long before the ads show up in the LLM response.
We're probably not far from that either, Gabe.
Yeah.
And somewhere Microsoft just got that in their index, so they're probably on it tonight.
I'm curious if they have things out there that check for what might be kind of sync articles, just automatically generate articles like all over the place, anywhere they could possibly go that it might be scraped by an AI, whatever, and making sure that they submit ad-centric articles so that it does end up in the model.
Right. We didn't talk about bias, but bias is a big piece to be concerned about from a risk.
Right. That's the term.
How the models are trained and what the bias behind them are. So especially when these are going to be the ones that are embedded inside of the actual tools that we're purchasing, and you don't have the ability to choose the model behind the scenes. So as that becomes reality, so we'll see some organization will eventually, build a model and let's say they customize it and they embed it into their product suite that you buy. Now the bias could be in there that we're unaware of, right?
Mm-hmm. So what do other people think? We've got 18 people on this call.
Yeah, I have a question. What about this executive order that the president just had? Does anyone know anything about this? And what's going to be the role in government?
I haven't read it yet.
But President Biden issues executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy. I mean, it just came out October 30th.
Right.
So what's the take on this? I mean, what kind of regulation are we gonna end up with, or can you even regulate this stuff? And I just pasted the article in the chat.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joel. I haven't personally read it yet either. I did see this in the news briefings come across yesterday. I'm interested to see. It feels like they're trying to be a little bit faster on top of this as they were on how the social networks came about, right? So I don't know what type of limitations they're going to try to put around it. That'll be interesting to follow.
Yeah. And keep in mind that only applies to the United States. You know, for
Right.
as much as it could be enforced, and you know, I won't get into a political discussion as I think nobody wants to do that.
Right.
It would only apply insofar as the United States. You know, so you know I'm just looking at the high level points. Protect against the risk of using AI to engineer dangerous biological materials. Well, gosh, I wonder if people who want to do that will do it. Yeah, they probably will.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
And Eric's pointing out some details. You know, I mean, the key with anything like this is read about it, you know, and then, you know, we'll see what happens. But an executive order, just to be clear, is not law. It can only apply, you know, like you know, Eric's saying, it can be applied to government employees, etc. But yeah. I'm walking that thin line of explaining politics.
Yeah, let's
Oh,
avoid,
yeah,
let's avoid
understood.
politics. So AI for hacking systems, Danny. So that's one of the other risks that's out there, right? So that someone can craft a pretty sophisticated exploit using AI as a risk. And that's another one of those risks out there to be aware of. And it can be used for malicious intent. And I think some of this policy starts to hint on ways that you probably, you know, may want to consider, like, you know, the better interest of humans, should you or should not questions, right? Social good or social not good. Because yeah, there's definitely going to be those capabilities available, and people will use it for exploiting those along the way. And in the security space, we're using it to detect or do more advanced detect threat protection. But then again, the tool we're using can also be used against us to craft more exploits. So again, it's going to be something that we need to stay on top of and follow and watch it evolve.
Yeah. I'm trying to find it, not to get into politics, but there was a really interesting experiment done. It was a few months ago where a guy did a proof of concept of creating biased articles and promoting them and showing how you could very easily manipulate people. And it was fascinating. Like the article is fascinating if I can find it. And he's like, this was never meant to be released or, you know, weaponized, etc. But you're like, oh my gosh, you know, like what a fascinating what if scenario that was proven out using AI in a malicious way. But I think, wow, I mean, AI has so many benefits for us as developers. We did a recent roundtable at here at the Indy.net Consortium. Sorry, I'm slurring my speech because I bit my tongue earlier today. It's really hard to talk. And we talked about, will AI displace programmers? And I'm like, gosh, I think it would just make us more efficient, you know, because like you're showing, you know, just the tools that we have right now already use AI to suggest code suggestions. You know, like you need to fix all this code. Would you like me to do it for you? You know, like even ReSharper has it. Now I think it has AI that'll build all your unit tests for you. You just find a function and you say generate unit test and it does it.
Right.
I mean, wow.
The efficiencies are really impressive. I feel like we're numerous years or decades away from replacing developers for sure. Now,
Mhm.
we may outpace developers in terms of those that may not want to adopt the tool sets in a lot of cases. And then again, we have to worry about those coming into the workplace that can show they can utilize the tools, but not have the proficiency of the experience or really underworkings of the processes. And again, I witnessed that early on in my career when somebody just started building websites hooking to databases in Dreamweaver, like I mentioned. It was like, hey, look what I can do. And I said, okay, well, can you make it do this? And they said, no, I don't know what the code is writing. So, that's the things that we're going to see is the biggest challenges. I feel at least for at least a decade or more for now.
Mhm.
So Eric, for C#, Copilot will work for C#. It works inside of Visual Studio and it works inside of VS Code.
Mhm.
I just haven't refined it enough. So my example there, it did produce C# code with no problem. It just that I didn't like where it put it. So yeah, so 30 days I think is the free trial and then $10 a month. Certainly if you're an independent consultant, I'd recommend having it. Again, just being aware of what you're letting it capture.
Yeah.
I don't know of any free ones that you can leverage in your IDEs. All the ones I've worked with required me to basically get my API keys from ChatGPT.
Yeah, I don't know. Does Copilot put everything into its model? Or is there an option to keep your stuff out of it? Like, can it process it locally? I thought originally they had that option, but I could be wrong.
I almost recall when I had added it, that option was there. I don't remember though either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, if you're doing any level of development on your own, it's definitely worth the $10 a month. Especially having the chat capability if you're in VS Code at your fingertips as well.
So let's see. From what I'm learning, or what I'm reading, is GitHub Copilot transmits snippets of your code from your IDE to GitHub to provide suggestions. Code snippets data is only transmitted in real time to return suggestions and is discarded once a suggestion is returned. All the AI stuff is done on a remote server that receives all your code, and you can opt out of allowing GitHub to use your code snippets for product improvements. Please do not sue me if that is incorrect. Read your own terms of use.
Yeah, exactly. That could change tomorrow, or the default options could change. In some aspects, Matthew, I agree with you. When I'm teaching it for new programmers, it's within the context of what they're doing under the caveat that they're asking or whatever it tells them, they're using it to explain the details to them. When they're creating assignments, I'm trying to work in like assignment changes now that require them to make something specific. So it's not like a requirement that everybody in the assignment could do or that the engine will write exactly for them. So I'll require them, to show work in a piece of them, something as generic as just making sure they know how to put their name in the output, or so something more specific or custom, depending upon what the example is.
Yeah. And like I've talked with I mentor high school students and I've talked about it. The people that use generated content, it doesn't just have to be code, right? You can generally find them out by asking them, tell me about how you came up with this. Explain the work to me. I mean, if you use generative AI to build some code, let's say a temperature converter, and you could explain that code to me, I'm not as upset because you can tell me line by line what that code is doing. That is the lesson.
Right.
But
so to Matthew's question about interviewing developers or code review is one way. I'm big, so when I hire new developers, I'm big on them submitting a portfolio of work in a Git repo, especially for newer developers. And I review it, understand what their code is doing, and then during the interview process, I'll have them explain to me what their code is doing, and then I'll know if they really understood what they created. Almost a code, same as a code review. And then in some cases, I might show them code and do exactly that. But many cases, if they have a Git repo, which is kind of an entry criteria I look for, they're going to have to explain to me the code that's out there in their repos.
So Gabe asks, how many people can explain the code used in the frameworks that people often adopt?
I'll plead the fifth on that one, Gabe.
Well, you know, I'll tell you the same thing I tell you my developers, and that's if you don't understand what the framework is that you've brought in, then we're getting rid of it. You know, that's why do we have it? If you can't tell me why we're using it or how it does its job, then clearly we don't need it.
Yeah, I think that's table stakes for evaluating a framework. Absolutely, I would agree on that. If you don't know why it's needed over a different framework or why you're actually using it, there's probably bigger problems. I don't think you need to understand exactly all the code inside the framework, though. I think to what Gabe's saying.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too. It sounds like the whole idea of a framework is you don't need to know what they're doing inside because you don't want to recreate the wheel.
Right. Yeah, there's times where I've done things the hard way and then like, oh my God, it was a framework to do that, right? But I would never understand how that framework was architected to do it faster. But I just know that that's the framework to do what I did the hard way.
I feel like that's what like undergrad in computer sciences, you like learn how to make your own list, and then you find out that there's a data type called list or something.
Right. Yeah, like putting a JSON body together for a web API call in C#, right? There's frameworks to do that so much quicker, but the hard way, is always fun to do once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I would train people, when I'd teach C#, I'd teach the hard way first and then show them the framework.
Right.
Yeah. Did you ever hear the not to get into an off-topic conversation, but it was Russia, I guess, or Israel. No, it might have been Russia built it was like a NuGet package or similar, just a library that was free to use, and one of their enemies took it, and inside of the code was something that called home and reported back like IP addresses or whatever, but no one ever looked at it. So their enemy kept on wondering why their stuff kept getting blown up. And finally they did a code review, and in the code used in like their missile system or whatever their system was, they were broadcasting out what their current location was. But they used a free package and they didn't understand what it was doing. Other people used it.
Yeah, that is the risks with the extensions as well as the 350K NuGet packages out there. So you could get one that had been designed with malicious intent. It's no different than interacting with the AI bot. You always have to take into consideration, is there a threat actor who provided this to us to leverage, right? So you might not want to use the NuGet package that only has 2 downloads.
Yeah, details.
Those might be the ones to stay away from. So when Gabe has his new JSON parser out there, and you might want to stick with Newtonsoft over his, right?
We trust you, Gabe. Does anyone else have any questions?
Does anyone have any recommendations for like educating an entire organization or like, I guess there's two education streams I'm thinking. One is like for developers, like the tech team, and then the other is for kind of the generative AI non-technical folks like product, customer success, things of that nature. Are there any like good, I don't know, courses or resources that you guys have used?
Google has some free courses. Organizational wise, I was kind of contemplating that earlier today. So basically those same two schools of thoughts that you have. How do you train the non-tech workforce to understand prompt engineering so that when they have the ability inside of the Office 365 and then compare that to the technical force for coding? I don't personally know. Like, I know there's definitely tons of material and training classes available. I've seen them out there. But from a, I'm sure somebody's working one that's more geared to like your organizational based training LMSs. We use LinkedIn Learning a lot in my orgs. I haven't checked. They have some courseware there, but I don't know to what extent yet.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I think we need to be in the forefront of training. I would almost prefer, as far as before we actually enable the tools behind any firewalls, especially in the Office 365 non-tech space, we roll out organizational training first. It would be ideal. Almost make it required, like security training.
That was the next part I was thinking is like from like a CIO, IT standpoint, like how do you, like one, you need to educate people that if you enter your proprietary data into like Chat GPT or whatever, that's hugely problematic. And two, like, can you even enforce that from like an IT perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from an enforcement perspective, obviously, we have our monitoring tools, right? We can see the information you're transmitting outbound in some aspects. So we could certainly put some monitoring capabilities in place. So the risks are going to be there. I think that's why the training and the awareness, it's no different than the training of the social engineering aspects that all the employees have to go through. I feel like it's got to be ready to be available at the time that tools become enabled. Yeah, phishing. Yeah, in many companies, the largest failures of those phishing attempts are IT staff, Gabe.
Really? Oh my gosh. Do you know why?
I don't know why, but I have seen and heard from various companies their IT team has the higher failure rates than other groups.
That's
It's either
shocking to me. I don't know how.
maybe in many cases we're on our mobiles and we're clicking links too quickly. Perhaps I don't know what the cause for it is, but I've seen or I've heard outputs of phishing tests that IT folks will have a higher failure rates at times. May not be fact, but I definitely have heard it from a few different organizations that it's occurred.
I'd definitely be interested to hear like what, and this is like not from a malicious standpoint, but the opposite, like what the highest hit rate of phishing and stuff like that is.
Gabe, can you clarify a bit more about to the state of AI agents, what you're getting at there?
Are you muted?
So I feel like you're going down the path of almost auto attendance, almost like chatbot approaches, without actually any human interaction. I don't think I can give any more additional specifics other than from an emerging and an evolving standpoint, and still learning and how we actually leverage them. If you're going down the chatbot path a bit.
I was asking about like where you set up an AI agent. Like the example that they give online is where they have an AI agent order them a pizza. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Where
Yeah.
it can perform, like you say, go out and get the best prices of M&Ms.
Mm-hmm.
It goes out and scours.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of specifics around around that area personally. You know, I feel, other than knowing that the technology's out there and that it's going to continue to evolve, and how we can leverage it probably in our individual spaces, that those are more use cases for. That's an interesting link that was just shared.
So I've been reading some articles about how AI has been used to generate, because AI is a learning model. So if you understand how neural networks work, they built networks for each of the individual business areas, and those would share data with each other, generating business requirements, handling QA, writing the code, etc. And after a few iterations with basically no one involved, a complete application was built and started running. From specifying it to developing it to QAing it to deploying it to having it be live. It took care of it all itself. And so then there's a few other approaches where people have been building that out, and it's fascinating that you can get something quote unquote free that does some of that work for you.
Pretty interesting stuff, just seeing the way they evolved it just on the thread quick.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, the abilities are there. The refinement will come eventually. But the part that is a lot of concernment is around those that see things like this and they're like, oh, programmers can just be replaced, right? I don't.
Right.
That's where we get the bad rap of, why can't you do that in one day versus 4 days or 3 days, when they see things that are capable or being done or piloted where it's writing the code
Right.
without really knowing the underlying context that's necessary or the complications that are there.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the that was part of the conversation a few months ago, was the generative AI that's out there right now, not that things won't change quickly in the future, is not creative. It's just very good at summarizing data in a convincing way that it looks like it came up with it itself.
Right.
But, when it does become creative, wow, that maybe I will be a little concerned at that point.
Yeah. Like I said, I think we have a decade. We probably have a little bit longer, like I said, we'll be more co-developing and more peer like developing with AI, I think, in the future than probably we ever did as doing the peer development concepts did. And eventually it's going to learn from the involvement of how we've enhanced what it's currently doing, and then be able to put that creativity spin, is the way I'll see it coming together.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Well, and Todd, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. Hopefully you'll come back again soon, and not as a deep fake.
Yes, my AI version of my best self will be here next time. Maybe in person, I'll send the AI person. But it was a pleasure. Again, my thanks to you guys having me here.
Yeah.
And I will pass along the slide deck. You're more than welcome to share it with the attendees and to the group. And I do hope everybody got something of value out of here tonight. And I definitely enjoyed the conversation. It's great to hear from everybody else in the group.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd.
Yep, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you from Theris as well, Todd. Thanks, mate.